Hey everyone, it's Sarah and I am back to film my reading journal for the month of May, so let's dive in. First off, I have my reading tracker. I didn't put as much pressure on myself to read every day. I found that in April there were a lot of times that I was reading just for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes just to say that I read for the day, and so I put less pressure on myself to read when I just wasn't feeling it or when I was busy. And so there were definitely days I didn't read, but then there were some days that I read quite a bit. All in all, had a pretty good month. So then moving into what books I read 7 books, which my goal was 8, so I fell a little bit short of that goal, but 7 is still great. And then I had 2 other books that I was in the process of reading when May ended, so I still think that was a success. And then my favorite book this month was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which we'll get into in just a bit. So then looking at my calendar for the month, I read kind of more near the end of the month, just looking at the concentration. I had 1 book I read in a day, which was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, but all in all, it was a good reading month. And then I also just have this in here as well. This was my spring challenge from Peanut Butter Taco, and I probably won't finish the last prompt because it's reading a poetry book, which is just not really in the mood to read poetry right now. And there's only, like a week or 2 left of spring anyways before summer kicks in. So, I finished most of those, and those have been fun to have kind of a quarterly challenge in there as well. So then moving into, I don't know what you call these pages, but kind of my notes pages and trackers. I had Bookopoly and Roll Your Read, which are 2 of my kind of reading games that I've been doing throughout the year. Bookopoly is kind of like a Monopoly game, and Roll Your Read is a dice rolling game, and that picks prompts for me to read, and I try to do about 1 a month. So for Bookopoly, I had a light blue cover, which was Never Ever Getting Back Together, and then for Roll Your Read, I had Title Includes a Name, which was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. You can see my distribution of Kindle books, regular books, and audiobooks, which I had a fairly even spread in terms of what types of books I was reading. I did have these, kind of first 5 or 6 books written down that I wanted to focus on this month, and I just didn't. Drums of Autumn is one that I just started now in June, but that's been on my list to read for a little while. Cytonic and Defiant are 2 that are part of a series that I just want to finish. And then Oliver Twist, I'm in the middle of reading Oliver Twist. I meant to finish it this month in May, but I just didn't. There's something about the book, or just Charles Dickens in general, that I struggle to pick up the book. I enjoy it when I'm reading it, but I just, for some reason, I don't know, struggle wanting to pick it up. So I will try to finish Oliver Twist in June, just because, like I said, I'm about 80 pages in, and I just need to, kind of hunker down and prioritize reading that. Then I have my bingo, which I fill out with various prompts. The only ones that I didn't complete this month were Book of the Month, which I'm going to start trying to focus on some of those this summer, because I have a lot that I have gotten in the last few months and just haven't read. An older TBR and a classic. So my classic is still Oliver Twist that I'm working on. And my priorities, I did finish reading the Dictionary of Lost Words, which was another one that I really wanted to read. So then moving into my Goodreads tracker, I track what format my books are on. So as you can see, like I said, it was a pretty even spread. I think I did 4 audiobooks, 3 Kindle books, and a regular hard copy book. So not too bad. And my monthly review, again, 7 books, which 7's been my lowest month, but hopefully in the summer I'll be able to kind of prioritize reading more, especially, you know, weekends when I'm at home. So moving into what I read this month, the first book I read was The Perfect Marriage. I've heard a lot about this book. I feel like there's been a lot of people, I don't know, I see it pop up a lot on recommendations or most popular books, and it was just okay for me. In the book you have Adam and Sarah, and they seemingly have the perfect marriage. Adam is an author, Sarah is a, you know, defense attorney, lawyer, and everything kind of breaks apart when Adam's mistress is murdered at their vacation home. Adam is arrested and, you know, charged with her murder, and Sarah decides to be his lawyer and defend him. So parts that I struggled with were just, there were parts that were just utterly unbelievable. You know, the cops were very incompetent, and I get that it's kind of a, you know, a small town, but there were certain things where, like, evidence that didn't get processed or collected or investigated, because, you know, I don't know. There were parts that just seemed so wildly unbelievable, that I had a hard time really getting into the story. I've read another book by Geneva Rose. I read You Shouldn't Have Come Here, I believe is also by her. And I really enjoyed that one, but I don't know, this one just wasn't for me. I just had a hard time kind of getting into the story and believing it. So I gave it 3 stars, maybe like 2.5, 3. So then moving on to The Lion. This was a romance, and I had gotten a copy of this book, or a free copy of this book, from the author. I went to Go Wild, and I met her last year at Go Wild. We sat at a table together. Go Wild is a planner conference, and she gave us a different copy of a book last year, and then this year she had given us the electronic copy of this. So I haven't read her other book, but this is a Highlander, like Scottish romance, and I hesitate to say anything bad about the book because I do so appreciate, you know, getting a copy and everything, but it just wasn't quite for me. It's a Highlander romance novel. You have Derek and Isabel, and they're kind of forced into marriage because, you know, they're found in a suspicious circumstance, or, you know, whatnot. And I don't know, I just didn't love the writing. I just didn't feel like it always flowed. And I didn't think that it went very deep in terms of, you know, characters. I thought they were a little bit too surface level. But, you know, like I said, I don't want to say anything too bad. It was fine. I so appreciate, you know, getting a copy of the book. And I do intend to read her other book that she gave us last year as well. But this one just wasn't my favorite. So moving on. Another book that was not my favorite was Never Ever Getting Back Together. Chose this one entirely off of the name. I love Taylor Swift, love her songs, and obviously the title is a lyric. Granted, they never really mentioned Taylor Swift, or very infrequently mentioned lyrics or you know, kind of song titles or things like that, which I kind of wish there was a little bit more Taylor Swift, like, insertion, I guess. But also, the book was just kind of meh for me. So this is a romance, but this is more of a like young adult romance. It's very minimal spice, and there's a reality TV show in the book, and it's called Second Chance Romance, and it's a reality show where a person goes back and redates all of his exes. So you have Jordy, and he's you know, kind of like the bachelor type character, and then his ex-girlfriends. They're redating to see if, you know, they can find love, or like, why did they break up? You know, could they be compatible now? Like that they're in a different stage of life, etc. So the premise, I think, was interesting. It was very, you know, I liked the idea. It was a little bit unique. The problem I had with it was that all of the characters are 20, like 21, 20, 22. They're all babies. And I feel like this would have worked better having a 30-year-old protagonist. Because, I don't know, when you're 20, how many people can you have dated and like redate a year later and be like, oh, now we're totally different people? I don't know, it didn't make sense to me, the ages of the characters. I also didn't like the characters. I thought that the characters were so forgettable. I had multiple, so the chapters go back and forth between two characters, Maya and Sky, and I had the hardest time figuring out who was talking in which chapter because they sounded so much the same. And I thought that, you know, in their head the character would sound one way, and then in person they would act completely different. And I don't know, it just, like, their motivations and their I just didn't think that they were very well written characters. They were forgettable, and I just didn't like them. So I gave it 2 stars. I wouldn't read again. It was not my favorite. Then moving on to some of my better books, because the rest of the month was pretty good from here on out. I had the Limpopo Academy of Private Detection, which is the next #1 ladies detective agency novel. My husband and I like to pick these up, especially before road trips, because they're just fun, easy, cozy mysteries. So in it you have Mara Matsue and Mama Makutsi, and they run the #1 ladies detective agency, and one of their, you know, kind of like gold standard books that they use to help them solve mysteries is called The Principles of Private Detection by Clovis Anderson. And Clovis Anderson ends up coming into their detective agency. So it was kind of like meeting a celebrity, just so fun. So they're, you know, just like talking his ear off. And, you know, so they get to kind of hang out with him throughout the novel. And then there's kind of 2 other storylines. Mama Makutsi and Pooty Reddy Pooty are building a house. And so they have a contractor that is less than ideal. He's not, he's not like your A+ dude. And then you have one of the, I guess he's not an apprentice anymore, but one of the young men that works in the auto repair shop. He gets involved through like a friend with some stolen cars, and he ends up getting arrested. And so then you're kind of going through his trial and trying to figure out, you know, if they can help him out. So yeah, just a very light, easy, you know, kind of low pressure mystery. Everything wraps up in like the last, you know, I usually listen to this as an audiobook. Everything wraps up in the last like 45 minutes of the book. But, you know, up until then, it's kind of a easy breezy, you know, kind of almost slice of life a little bit, seeing how they live and what they do, and, you know, they're kind of their little squabbles and things like that. So I always like this series, and this one was good. Next, we have my favorite book for the month. This was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and this was so good. So Henrietta Lacks and her cells are incredibly important to science, but no one really knows who Henrietta Lacks is, or very few people know who Henrietta Lacks is. For a while, they were giving like a false name, Helen Lane, and so a lot of people, you know, didn't even know her identity. But Henrietta Lacks was a poor Black woman who had ovarian cancer and, cervical cancer. I believe it was cervical cancer. And she went in, to the doctor, and they ended up taking some of the cells from her tumor to try to grow in culture, because they had been doing some research on, kind of growing human cells outside of the body, growing them, in medium, and they hadn't been, successful. Usually the cells would die within a couple of hours or a day. And so they took some samples from her tumor before they operated on her, and lo and behold, they grew amazingly well. And they would fill whatever medium they were allowed to grow in. They would keep reproducing, and that is what is called an immortal cell line. They will continue growing, and to this day, they are continuing growing. She died in 1951, I believe it was. And so yeah, her cells are still growing and reproducing, and to this day. And they're in nearly every lab in the world, because that's how important of these cells are. So these cells are so important. But, they were taken without her knowledge or her family's knowledge. And so her family didn't even know about, kind of the scientific impact or the fact that they had taken these cells until the 70s. And so the book goes kind of back and forth between learning about Henrietta and her family, and it also talks about the scientific impact that her cells have had in terms of impacting scientific research, medication development. At one point they talk about how her cells help develop the medications her family is on, but her family is still, poor, and they can't even afford all of the medications they need that their moms, or their Henrietta cells helped develop. So it's super interesting. It's super, I don't know. It was fascinating. I learned so much. I really enjoyed it. I liked how the story was told. There were lots of, like I said, little kind of offshoots about different drugs, or kind of the ethics part of it too. How different laws like consent and things like that have shaped themselves over the years. And like I said, really enjoyed it. I think there's an HBO show or series or something like that, because I think I saw that when I was I think my audiobook cover had that on there. So definitely want to check that out if that is indeed a thing. But really enjoyed this. This was a recommendation. My sister read it first a couple of months ago, and she told me I should read it, so I'm really glad I did. Next up, I have another recommendation. This one is a recommendation for my mom. This was the Dictionary of Lost Words, and you have Esme, and she is growing up in Oxford. Her dad is a part of a group that is compiling words for the Oxford English Dictionary, and she grows up in what they call the scriptorium. That's like their workshop. And, over the years, she kind of starts collecting words of her own, words that, fall off the table and are kind of forgotten about. She also, writes down words when she talks to different people or meets different people. And she, over time, realizes that there's words that don't make it into the dictionary, or there are words that this definition doesn't make it into the dictionary. And a lot of times it's because they're more common words, like, used by the working class or like the servant class people that, haven't been written down in a book, but they're widely known among that population or among women. And so that's where, she's kind of compiling these lost words or women's words into, kind of her own collection. I really liked the characters. I thought that this one was just beautifully written. I really loved the characters. I loved the setting. I loved the idea of it all. I guess I've never even thought about how a dictionary came to be, because I think we just kind of take it for granted that, there are dictionaries out there. But this was essentially, the start of of the dictionary. So there's a lot of kind of factual things that happen in the book. Obviously, Esme is a fictionalized character, but a lot of the people in the book are real people, or the events that really happened. So it was really, really well written. Really enjoyed it. And then last but not least, I have The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. That is an Agatha Christie novel. I've been working on reading all of Hercule Poirot's mysteries from the start. I've read a lot of his mysteries over the years, but I haven't read them all, and I thought it'd be fun to read them in order and kind of fill in, the gaps as I go. So this one I have read. This is my second time reading it, but I did listen to it as an audiobook this time. It was a one-day read for me. The audiobook was only, like 7 hours long, so not bad at all. And in the book, you have Widow Ferris, who dies seemingly at the hand of, seemingly of suicide. And there were kind of whispers or rumors about maybe she killed her ex-husband, or I guess he wasn't an ex-husband. She killed her husband. But, nothing was ever, official, or she was never arrested. It was just kind of like gossip. And she's nearing the end of her mourning period. She's kind of closely connected to Roger Ackroyd, and people think that she's going to get married to him, kind of once her mourning period is up and, it's appropriate for her to remarry. But she dies, and then like less than 24 hours later, Roger Ackroyd is stabbed. And so you kind of have these two deaths that happen, and Hercule Poirot just happens to be, he had just moved to the town to kind of retire, grow his vegetable marrows and garden, and he kind of gets sucked into the mystery just because of, proximity. He's there, and, it's kind of an interesting case. So this is, I believe I read that this is the only Agatha Christie novel on the 1001 books to read before you die. So definitely, if you've never picked up an Agatha Christie book, I think this is a wonderful one to pick up. It's nice and twisty. It's well written. I love Agatha Christie. And then Hercule Poirot is my favorite detective of all time. So I really enjoyed reading this. Definitely will continue to read more books in the series. I think this one was number 4 in the series. So we still have tons and tons to go, but definitely a good one. Not my favorite Agatha Christie novel. I have a couple that hold other places in my heart, but this is still, quite up there. So that was everything I read in the month of May. Sorry this video is going up a little bit late. We were traveling at the very end of May, beginning of June, so just trying to get back to the swing of things and get back to it. So I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you, in a few weeks for my next video. Bye now.